why should Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and or First Nations people have a voice above the rest of us? Well, you have come with your culture, you've come with your identity, you've come with your language, you've come with your religious, and you can still maintain your religious practices here. You've come to this country in search of freedom. When we as First Nations people have suffered continuous injustice for the past 250 years. So for us to be seen to be given something above the multicultural, it's like you need to understand your place in this discussion. You know, we as a race of people, we've never fled this country and surrendered our sovereignty to go and find freedom somewhere else. So we're playing catch up because everyone who's come to this country, you've come in search and you've been given freedoms. We aren't free on our own country. So that's where you need to understand your place in this discussion. Asians, Greeks, Italians, you're not the most incarcerated, you're not the most sick, you're not the most disadvantaged, because we would have a closing the gap for your ethnicity. We have a closing the gap for us as First Nations people, for all the various reasons as to why we are in this position, because of the layers and layers and layers of systemic 250 years of discrimination in this country.
Welcome to Think Voice. I'm Kyriakos Gold, and today we're talking about unfinished business. In our previous episode, we spoke about how we feel about living in stolen land, and I feel that that conversation has a little bit more to give us. Before we go to everybody, I want to hear how you feel, because you're so passionate about that particular point.
I think the point about stolen land is exactly what others have been saying about that sense of discomfort as a racialised settler. That whilst we've all grown up with histories of racism, there's always been that sense of, do I really even have a right to be here? This is a land that was violently, forcibly taken from First Nations people. For me, it's a critical part of our own healing as racialised settlers, let alone the healing that needs to happen for First Nations people.
Just want to say, I've been here 30 years. I grew up in Greece with a house full of Indigenous artifacts because Dad was always celebrating that, but I had no idea about the history. And I remember celebrating Australia Day. And I remember the moment that I realized that I shouldn't have been, and how ugly that felt. So how do we manage that journey for other migrants that may not know the history?
Kyriakos, can I give you an example? Many, many years ago, I was working as a supporter and ally for Dr. Jackie Huggins, and we had just done a number of work events. She was obviously leading the process in a number of Indigenous communities. And we hit Darwin and we were about to get into a cab. And as we got in, we were chatting in the back, and then we went through a certain part where the Longgrass people were there. And it became apparent that this taxi driver was Greek, and he started to basically spew out this incredible racist diatribe about the people of the Longgrass. And I, of course, was absolutely devastated that here was someone, in my view, that had migrated as a teenager, had experienced racism of his own, and had not taken the time to actually look at the history of where he was living. And when I confronted him and said, "Do you know anything about these people?" he said no. He was shocked. Nobody had ever asked him that question. And so, of course, Jackie jumped out of the cab and said, "I'm leaving this one to you," rightly so. And I spent half an hour in that cab basically exploring why he didn't know. And I think that's the fundamental question that we need to ask. We need to be more active about what we don't know, and this is going to be a critical part of the lead up to the referendum.
Just adding to what Maria mentioned, I think teaching people what they don't know is the most important thing. I think many migrant communities, there's a lot of fear. And sorry, I'm not meaning to talk about the elderly people, but it is sometimes because they, like, when I went to Bendigo a few years ago, and there were some elderly people there, white Anglo people there, and they were frightened to have a nurse who was from a different ethnic background because they only had seen or lived with people of their own color. And all of a sudden, they've been looked after by somebody from a different community and different color, freaked them out. So again, this is, I think, asking people to learn to work with people. I think teaching them that basic aspect of we're all humans. As I was telling Alexander, if you were to cut all our hands, whatever color we are, there's going to be red blood from all of us. We are one human race. I think teaching that to people. But I just wanted to say one thing. I want to leave a question to every one of us here. Eva, you mentioned what's tomorrow going to be. This referendum will be successful if 4 out of 6 states vote for it. Victoria and New South Wales, you might get it. How do we as migrant communities talk to people in other states? I think that's a big message. That's a big challenge for every one of us here.
I just want to pick up on that issue of being played against each other, because one of the concerns I have with the way these debates are happening is that multicultural is being pitched against First Peoples. But a lot of the work that a lot of us are doing, there are people who are living who are First Peoples and multicultural. Their families, their heritages are very mixed. So where do they sit in this, either or binary? And the other thing I wanted to say is if we're going to be honest and do truth telling and truth listening, we're talking about ourselves as multicultural communities as being colonized, and then we come here as colonizers. But I think we need to be honest. Some of us come from colonizer heritages. I'm speaking about my own Italian heritage. I should apologize at least, I'm sure, to one person in this room and what fascism did in the Horn of Africa. So if we're going to have these real debates and questions, let's remove the binary and let's talk about all of us together, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I apologize now for anyone in this room if my ancestors were responsible for the genocide, the stolen generation in Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea. We are carrying that, some of us who come to this country.
There's been some comment being made about the way that there is at times a framing of the voice to Parliament in terms being played out in terms of a game. And I think for many politicians, it is probably little more than a game, and that game is for them to win. They want to win power, and they will do that at any cost. That for them is not about social justice. It's not about addressing the truth. It's not about learning to walk with our Indigenous Australians together. It's about them playing a game. As a queer man of colour who's had the privilege of working for most of my life, my working life, with Indigenous Australians, I can bring to this discussion my experience of the same-sex marriage plebiscite, where the game was played by some politicians to create fear. And there were a lot of mistruths put forward that somehow same-sex marriage would make the institution of marriage lose its status and its standing, and that it would be a slippery slope, that other forms of marriage, maybe between a man and an animal, would be the next thing that people would be asking for. These lies that were put forward for many people who opposed same-sex marriage were just a game to secure their power base. And I think when we talk with our multicultural communities, we need to explain also that it's not just about putting forward a truth, it's about part of the game dynamics that happen too. And that some of the game is to oppose the voice with lies, that somehow the voice is a third tier of parliament, that it's going to give extra powers to Aboriginal people that they already have. We know that's not true.
And like I've been holding on to my pearls for the last 4 years, the world hasn't ended.
So when same-sex marriage did come through, all that happened was that love grew. And with the voice to Parliament, what will happen is that democracy will grow. Love today in Australia is stronger for same-sex marriage. Democracy in Australia will be stronger for the voice to Parliament.
We have much to learn from the same-sex plebiscite and how multicultural communities were actually played in that. And, you know, that really goes back to us being mindful. It's happened before. We need to be mindful that we don't let it happen again. And it's our responsibility that we spread the truth and proper information out there to our communities.
Thank you for bringing that colourful logo from the Yes campaign. Of course, share with us your personal reflection, but I also want to ask you a question. It looks like this campaign is treated like an election. Like a disconnected from the transformative piece that we have to go through. And the timeline of the campaign that is so short tells me, as a person that works in communications, that this is the way it's treated by politicians. It seems like you know a lot of things about the campaign, so I wanted your comment on this.
We'll talk about the campaign, and I talk about it as a political animal. In Australia, there's been 18 referendums since 1901. 8 of them have got through. And the assumption's always been that it has to be a political consensus amongst the political parties to get a referendum through. It is now believed that is no longer necessary, and the way around that is to win civil society. This is not going to be a party political campaign. This is going to be a civil society campaign, and that is the group that has been asked to mobilise. And that's why I think it's really important in this room that we think about conversations that we have and how do we get the word out. It is pointless talking about people that are not going to support the voice. We know that there is a number of people, probably around 25%, that are locked in. They will never support the voice regardless. People say, what about this person I met, for example, on a taxi in Darwin? Don't worry about them. If they're not going to support it, walk away. Walk to the next person. Only worry about people that can be won to the vote. And that's the way we're going to win the election. The other thing people have talked about, the languages. NITV and SBS will be doing lots of materials and using their radio stations, and they've got an entire unit devoted to the voice. They are not taking a political position, but they will fact check and they will provide written material. Their written material is fabulous. For example, the voice is the Uluru Statement has been translated into 63 languages. Something like 20 of those are Indigenous languages. The rest are major community languages. The materials that they'll be producing will be materials that will be available for distribution and for the campaign. The government will not be funding this campaign. It will be civil society, and it will be civil society that needs to mobilise, and people need to be really pragmatic. No point in arguing around Australia Day. No point in arguing anything that's not about the voice, because anything that loses a vote is a vote that's lost to the referendum. So we're there to discuss the voice and its importance in part of the Uluru Statement and voice treaty truth. That's the thing. Avoid distractions. Avoid my famous rabbit holes, and don't start raising really complex discussions. Well, should or shouldn't we change the Australia Day? That will only lose votes. We need to be really pragmatic. There is not going to be a political consensus of the political parties behind this campaign. This will be the first time ever a referendum is won in this country without that political consensus. I think it can be done, and I think it can be done for a number of reasons, one of which is the youth vote. And I also think that the ethnic communities will also come in behind in larger numbers in large numbers. Having said that, avoid people that are against it, because they'll just waste your time.
Is it pragmatic, though, to expect people to think as politicians? Because that's that's advice that we would give to a party or to people that are very much in tune with an election campaign. We're talking about everyday people that have a lot of emotion attached to this conversation. How do we communicate that very solid advice to somebody that may not have the skill base to get it?
There'll be training. I'm giving you the discussions that have been occurring amongst the campaign organisers, which are largely led by First Nations. This is a First Nation-led campaign. We are their allies. They will be providing the material. They will provide, if you like, the keywords, the key phrases, the key discussion. There will be training done in terms of conversation. The simple way to get a conversation, and it's very simple, is you have what they call a public narrative. You talk to someone and you explain why it's important to you and why they should listen to you, why you have some empathy with each other. You then explain why it's important to them, and then you explain why the moment's important. And those conversations need to occur throughout the country. And that is, it seems to me, that's the way we're going to win the campaign. And it's a very pragmatic but very well seasoned campaign style.
We're just going to put a little full stop, and we'll meet you next week. I'm Kyriakos Gold, and this is Think Voice.